Essendon has come to a deal with the AFL where it looks like we're going to get an extra home game at the MCG from next year. I think this is good news. I'm going to explain all about why I think this is good news in this video.
They may try to break our spirits. They may try to get the best.
So the Bombers look like they're going to get 5 home games at the MCG, up from 4 next year. This was reported by Callum Toomey. Essendon is set to complete a quest more than a decade in the making, with the club to play an extra home game at the MCG in 2026. We did ask for one last year and we were waiting in the fixture for it to happen, but this year's fixture only had the 4 home games, so the AFL didn't agree and didn't grant us that request. They obviously wanted us to continue to play more games at Marvel Stadium. The Bombers are brokering a deal with the AFL to play one more home game at the Home of Footy next season, 2026, in an ambition that has been on their mind for many years. Under the current fixturing, the Marvel Stadium tenants play 7. The Marvel Stadium tenant Essendon plays 7 home games at the Docklands venue every year and 4 at the MCG. But the AFL understands that the split is set to be 6 home games at Marvel and 5 at the MCG next year, as the Bombers get their wish to increase their presence where finals will be played. Essendon moved from its MCG base to be one of the start-up tenants at Marvel Stadium in 2000 when it won its last premiership, but through the past 15 years has tried at different stages to push to even up the number of home games at the venue. The arrangement is expected for 2026, but not locked in before that. Next year, we'll see the Bombers host bumper blockbuster games at the MCG, with the club due in its schedule to be the home team for games in round 1 against Hawthorn, Anzac Day against Collingwood, and on Carlton on King's Birthday Eve. Docklands has had major tenants Essendon, St Kilda, North Melbourne, the Western Bulldogs and Carlton play at the venue in its 25-year operation, with the Bombers in 2000 and the Dogs in 2016 as the only premiership teams to be hosted there. That is something that I have been on about for a very, very long time. I really think in some respects the AFL use us. They use Essendon at Marvel Stadium simply because obviously the AFL own Marvel Stadium now, and we're really a means to an end for the AFL. They want us playing there because we're the only big club that plays there that can generate, decent crowds there, right? As opposed to North Melbourne, the Bulldogs, and Kilda, these sort of clubs. My take on that is it's not our job, right, to just be a pawn for the AFL. It's not our job to just be a convenience, right, for the AFL, which is what we are. Let's face it. What Essendon have been since moving to Marvel Stadium, we are a convenience for the AFL. We're there to fulfil the AFL's crowd quotas and those sort of things at Marvel Stadium, which is really annoying from my point of view, because that's not what we're here for, obviously. Obviously, like all the clubs in the AFL, we want to make decisions that are in our best interests. And in my view, our best interest is to be an MCG tenant. That's what we should be. That is our natural home. Certainly has always felt that way to me. Back in the 90s, it was always our natural home at the MCG once we moved away from Windy Hill. And being used really by the AFL as a kind of a tool to fulfil crowd quotas at Marvel Stadium, because Richmond and Collingwood don't play there, so it's really up to us, is kind of unfair. And getting an extra home game, I think, is the first step in what is hopefully a longer quest to actually move to the MCG permanently. Everyone will still play games at Marvel Stadium, that 2, 3, 4 games there. But I would certainly like to be playing more than certainly the current 4, and even more than next year's 5. When I first started this channel, I made a video, and it's either still the most popular video I've made, or third or fourth most popular video, but it's right up there. And it was why Essendon has been no good for a generation, why we just haven't been any good. And I was pointing out, in my view, I traced it all back to the decision to move to Marvel Stadium, which is kind of a controversial take, I think, when you think about it, because how can you attribute, a generation of no success just to playing at obviously a good venue, under the roof, good conditions, all those sort of things. But I attributed it more to the culture. I attributed it more to, the perception of the club, culture is learned behaviour and how that sort of affected the on-field performance of the club, which is hard to measure because how do you measure culture, which is learned behaviour? But I think that's what it did. I look back at us in the 90s, and for those who are watching this channel that don't remember back into the 90s, we were the biggest club. We were the biggest club. We had the most supporters. We got the biggest crowds. We had the biggest membership. We were the biggest club in the AFL in the 90s. And it wasn't just the biggest crowds and everything. I remember there were surveys that came out every year in the Herald Sun that asked, who has the most supporters, and Essendon would always win it. We were the biggest club in the AFL. And Collingwood, up until 1999, were still playing a couple of games per year at Victoria Park. And they decided to move permanently to the MCG in 2000, which was the exact same year that we moved to Marvel Stadium. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm going back about 27 years now, but I remember thinking at the time that especially when Melbourne was granted the 2006 Commonwealth Games, which meant they were going to redevelop the MCG, I thought it's only going to take Collingwood to get their act together, right? Just to get their act, because they got the wooden spoon in 1999. Collingwood, remember, they got the wooden spoon. It's only going to take Collingwood to get their act together, and they're now playing at the biggest stadium permanently, which is also a brand new stadium, redeveloped because of the Commonwealth Games with the new Ponsford stand and member stand and everything. It's only going to take them just to get their act together a little bit, and they're going to scoot ahead of us. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. You had Collingwood, who had got the wooden spoon in 1999, got their act together, started to perform on the field at the biggest venue, now the newest venue. That's the other irony. MCG became newer than Marvel because of the redevelopment. And Collingwood just went ahead in leaps and bounds. And we were stuck at Marvel, and I just felt that lack of ambition. That's what it was to me, a lack of ambition. A club like us should aspire, in my view anyway, to be the biggest and the best. And I kind of enjoyed that back in the 90s. I enjoyed not just the fact that we were a good team, but I enjoyed, bragging to my, Collingwood friends, Carlton friends that, hey, we're the biggest club. That sort of took a back seat after we moved to Marvel. Even in 2000, 2001, it kind of took a back seat because all of a sudden we weren't playing at the biggest and best venue, and the ambition of kind of being the biggest team kind of was put on hold until we moved back to the MCG. It was just something that, we couldn't do. And I thought that lack of ambition of moving to Marvel Stadium fed into the culture where all of a sudden it didn't matter that we weren't the biggest and the best anymore. It was all about the money. And I think that feeding into the culture really has been it was almost like selling your soul a little bit. And I think it's subsequently been a disastrous move moving to Marvel Stadium. It just hasn't worked. I think it's not the on-field stuff because that's not an excuse. You should be able to perform anywhere. But I just think the effect it's had on the club culture. I think going from the biggest club in the AFL and one that's has the ambition to stay and be the biggest, to move to a smaller stadium, which kind of took away that ambition, in my view. It kind of took away the bragging rights of being the best. I think that's had a terrible effect subsequently on the club culture. And I think this move to play an extra game at the MCG is the first step in hopefully a long step to get back to where we belong. Because, I think growing up in the 80s and 90s, we really made good decisions consistently. I mean, the appointment of Kevin Sheedy was a good decision, and we benefited immensely from appointing, the right coach at the right time for this football club. We moved away from Windy Hill at the right time. I mean, the club generally made good decisions, and that decision to move to Marvel in isolation might not have seemed that bad, but I think it's kind of led to, I guess what you call it, the butterfly effect, where like that move led to other things happening, which led to other things happening. And I think you can trace our unsuccessful era back to that. So I think this is a good move to play games at an extra game at the MCG. It's only one extra game, of course, but it's not so much the one extra game. It's just the principle. It's sort of the idea. And I think the club recognises That's the other thing. Sure, it's only one extra game, but it means that the club understands and recognises what needs to be done. They know we're not going to just get 7 home games at the MCG just given to us overnight by the AFL. But if the club can work on it and continue to do deals with the AFL, we might be able to work something out over the next, 5, 6, 7 years or so to increase that further. And I think what's positive to me with this is just the fact that the club have recognised, and have recognised for a little while, that we actually should be based more at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. And sure, it's only one extra game, but the fact that they have recognised this and have, performed an action to actually get it to happen is a positive. So what do you guys think? Do you think we should play more games at the MCG? I think we should. I think it would be fantastic for the ambition and the size and the type of club that we want to be. It's not just the fact that the grand finals played at the MCG, but it's just that it's the biggest and best stadium. And if you have an aspiration to be the biggest and best club, well, the biggest and best club should aspire to play at the biggest and best stadium. That's kind of where I see this argument. Or are you guys happy at Marvel Stadium? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this video, everybody. Have a great day. And of course, go Bombers.